Hi, this is Dan Matson. Please note that this podcast was created several years ago. Some of the links, email addresses, phone numbers, and promos are outdated and no longer valid. If you want to contact me, my email address is woodenboatdan@gmail.com. Once again, that's woodenboatdan@gmail.com. Thanks and enjoy the podcast. Welcome to Hooked on Wooden Boats, weekly podcast episode number 11, as in 1-1. I am your host, Dan the Man Matson. This is the world's first podcast fully dedicated to the art, craft, history, and tradition of wooden boats. Well, folks, it's great to have you back today for another one of my weekly episodes on wooden boats. Today's featured segment will be an interview with Marty Loken of the Island Boatshop on Marrowstone Island in Washington State. I had a great interview with Marty. It'll be a lot of fun, so stick around for a few minutes and we'll get that going. And be sure that you don't miss next week's episode, number 12, because in that episode, I will have an interview with Bill Mailer. And Bill is the executive director of the Northwest School of Wooden Boat Building. And that particular school is one of only 3 schools in the U.S. where you can get the equivalent of an Associate of Arts degree, an accredited degree in the wooden boat building and woodworking. So be sure and tune in for that next week. It's a lot of fun. Bill was a great guy. He gave me a tour of the facility there and got to meet some of the students and take some pictures, and a good time was had by all. So be sure you don't miss that. Just a reminder, this is a weekly show. It's about 30 to 60 minutes in length, depending upon what I do with the show. And it's a place where we have fun talking about wooden boats and people that love wooden boats like myself. And you're probably one of those people, or you wouldn't be listening to this show, right? There's lots of ways you can connect with me. You can go to the website, hookedonwoodenboats.com. And once you get there, you can click on the in the upper right-hand corner and subscribe to my e-news list if you'd like to do that. You can leave comments on my blog and show notes. You can email me at dan@hookedonwoodenboats.com. And on Twitter, I'm at twitter.com/woodenboatdan. On facebook.com/woodenboatdan. And I have a voicemail feedback hotline, 424-261-2360. 424-261-2360. So I would encourage you to call that with any questions, comments, any suggestions. Just tell me if you're live out there. That would be awesome. A couple other items here. I picked up a book at the library called Schooner, and it's a story of the Gannon and Benjamin Boatyard in Martha's Vineyard. And Martha's Vineyard is actually an island off the coast of Massachusetts. And these guys started a wooden boat shop there about 30 years ago. And about 10 years ago, they built this 60-foot wooden schooner. And it's a fascinating book, and it's about half pictures. And that's the part I love about it. I can't handle books without pictures, and this got a lot of big color pictures. Shows the building process from start to finish. Lots of interesting stories on this particular boat, which was named Rebecca. The original people that were hiring Gannon and Benjamin to build the boat actually went bankrupt, and so the boat went through bankruptcy court before it was finished, ended up in different hands, and the folks that purchased the incomplete boat then rehired Gannon and Benjamin to fix the boat, or to finish building the boat, basically. But it's really a cool story, so I would encourage you to check that out at the library or buy the copy of it. It's a lot of fun. And also on my website, on the resources tab at the top, If you click on resources, there's some books there that I recommend, and if you would like to purchase that book, you can do so through my website. It takes you to Amazon when you click on that particular book, and then I get a small commission of 4%, which helps, buy me a latte once in a while or something like that. So that was a lot of fun, and I finished watching this 2-hour film called Charlotte, which is also about Gannon and Benjamin. And it's a story of them building a 50-foot schooner, and it's an excellent show. And if you'd like to see that, I've got a link on my website. And if you go to hookedonwoodenboats.com/Charlotte, CHARLOTTE, that will take you to the site on the internet where you can watch that documentary for free. So I'd recommend you do that. It's really cool. Well, I've continued to track people down in the wooden boat world, which is just amazes me. The more people I meet, the more people I find have connections to wooden boats and are passionate about wooden boats, which is really a lot of fun. Trying to track down a gentleman by the name of Tug Busey, and he actually lives pretty near to where I do, or at least his parents do. And I think I mentioned a week or two ago that he built a 14-foot pram and took it down the Missouri River and the Mississippi and a couple other rivers from Iowa down to the Gulf of Mexico. Then he took the intercoastal waterway around the Gulf, across Florida, and up the east coast of Maine. So trying to hook up with him for an interview. And then another gentleman, Dave, that's got a company called Dog Island Boat Works, which is on Guaymas Island, Washington. So I'm going to contact him. And I've got other folks out there that I'm looking for too, which is kind of fun. Kind of like doing some detective work on these people. And the other thing I've done, which you might want to consider doing, is I've set up some Google alerts. If you go to google.com/alerts, what you can do there, if you haven't done it before, is you can set up alerts. So, for instance, what I've done is anytime there's a new article or posting on the internet that has the keywords wooden boat or wooden boats or Nordic boat or Viking ship, I get an alert once a day that gives me links to that information. So I've found some really cool articles about folks that are into wooden boats, and that's been a lot of fun. So you might want to think about doing that too. Let's see what else here. Yeah, I mentioned my resources page. I've got quite a few books on there. You can subscribe to Wooden Boat Magazine through that link, that page. And there's also a handful of tools and some epoxy on there, just basic tools that you would use to build a wooden boat. So if you want to help defray my costs a little bit, that would be awesome. As I mentioned earlier, I get paid 4% if you make a purchase there. So just helps offset a little bit of the cost of doing this program, which I love doing. I would do it for free anyway. In fact, I am doing it for free, come to think of it. But if people start purchasing some books, that will help. So anyway, I think that's it for now. So let's go ahead and start the interview. Take it away, Marty Loken. Well, it's November 22nd, and I am at the Island Boatshop in Nordland, Washington. It's a metropolis here. Not really, but I'm in the boat shop here with Marty Loken, the owner. Marty, thanks for joining us today.
You're welcome. Glad to be aboard.
Yeah, it's great. So we're actually sitting in a rescue boat of Marty's that he's going to be working on this year. It's a 20-foot sailboat that he's restoring. And so, Marty, tell me about you. Where are you from originally? And tell me about your early boating experiences and that kind of thing.
I sometimes feel that I was maybe born in a boat. It isn't literally true, but my dad was someone who would just build a boat whenever he wanted one, and I grew up in small wooden boats, mostly fishing with him, and in Ballard in Seattle, and sort of adopted his attitude about boats. When you wanted one, you would just build it. And so when I was 10 years old, I remember wanting my own boat and pestering my dad to get him to build one for me, or at least help me build one. And his instructions were very brief. He basically pointed down to the stairway to the unfinished basement of our house and told me to get downstairs and build it, and sort of quit whining about it. So we had a room downstairs that wasn't really a workshop, but it was just bare 2x4 studs and this unfinished basement. And so I went downstairs and puzzled over it and ended up designing and building what turned out to be a 7-foot pram out of 1/4-inch plywood that we had laying around. And it was really a terrible, ugly little boat, but fun to build. So I moved from there into building a little 8-foot hydroplane, one of the designs out of Popular Science magazine, called Minimax, which I think was probably the first boat for a lot of people to build. And then I remember building a little canvas-covered kayak, only about 8 feet in length, which leaked profusely. And by the time I was 11 or 12, I was already getting more interested in restoration.
So you built those boats before you were 11 or 12?
Yeah.
Wow.
But, I think I just inherited this Scandinavian gene that allows you to get away with things like that, and to believe that you can build anything if you have the materials. And that may not literally be true, but that was the way my dad and grandfather always were, and so I was coerced into believing that I could do that too.
Yeah. So what did your dad build some bigger boats that you used out in the Sound when you were a kid, or skiffs, or
he mostly
what kind of boats did he build?
He mostly built smaller rowing skiffs for salmon fishing, and then later, when I was a little kid, he built a 14-foot outboard boat. I think he actually built that one from plans, and that was the first boat that I restored. It had an old Briggs & Stratton 3-horse air-cooled inboard engine when my dad built it, and we fished out of that boat for years and years, and then the boat got tired, the engine got tired, and he allowed me to take the boat and restore it. I think I was maybe 13 or so at that point. So I, being a kid who was interested in hydroplanes, which were then becoming the big thing, I wanted to go fast. So I removed the old Briggs & Stratton inboard and plugged the shaft log and put a new transom on it and converted this fishing boat into a double cockpit racing runabout and powered it with an ancient 10-horse Johnson outboard.
Nice.
And so we would race around Shilshole Bay with friends of mine who were also complete boat addicts. We all just grew up on the beach and little sort of water rats.
Down at Golden Gardens area, or? Yeah,
this was before Shilshole Marina existed. There was actually just a beach there, and but we would hang around the boathouses as kids, Ray's Boathouse and Reed's Boathouse and Canal Boathouse and others, and spend a lot of time on the water as kids. scrounging old rotten boats and dragging them up the beach and trying to refloat them. And so we were all quite oriented to the water from a very early age.
Yeah. So when you got out of high school, did you go into boat building trade then, or what did you do?
I thought when I was in high school that I would probably just build boats. But I was also interested in writing and had an opportunity to work in my last couple of years of high school as a copy boy at the Seattle Times. And I was just completely in love with newspaper work at that time, and I was lucky enough to land a job in college as a sort of a cub reporter at the Times, and then I became a full-time general assignment reporter, and I ended up working for the Times for 10 years throughout the 1960s as a reporter. And I was always building and restoring boats on the side, but you know how life gets in the way of some things that you want to do full-time. So I ended up having 2 or 3 careers that were not boat building or boat restoration before I finally got back to full-time boat work in the 1990s. But I worked for the Times, and then I was a magazine and book editor in the 1970s. I was the managing editor of Alaska Magazine. Moved to Alaska for a couple of years. Got deeply involved in photography and moved back to Seattle. Started a stock photo library and operated that. And was also a marine photographer, specializing, of course, in classic boat photography.
Mm-hmm. So during that time, though, you continued to boat and build and repair boats on the side?
I've never for very long stopped restoring, especially restoring old rotten boats. Mm-hmm. It's just completely addictive, and I love saving old boats. And I think what we're known for here more than anything else is old boat rescue. And I don't care if we restore the boat or if someone else does. The object is to drag them home or to the boat shop, find somebody who will restore them or who will allow us to restore them on their behalf, and then get the job done, get the boat back in the water, and move on to the next derelict.
Yeah. So you said in the 90s, and you went into full-time boat building then, or tell me about from the 90s to now what you've done.
We decided in the mid 90s that we had to find a way to build or restore boats full time. And so we started a business in Seattle called the Restoration Shop in, I think, 1997. And that was the same year that we bought the Wooden Boat Shop retail store from its owners, who we learned were planning to close the store, and we just couldn't stand to see that happen any more than we could stand to see a classic old boat rotting away. So we took over the Wooden Boat Shop retail store. We started the Restoration Shop to restore boats for customers, and really it didn't take long to figure out that boat restoration work was more interesting and actually had some potential of surviving as a business more than operating a sort of cult retail store. Mm-hmm. So our energy really shifted more and more toward boat restoration, and in at the end of 1999, I moved from Seattle to Whidbey Island and reluctantly closed the wooden boat shop, which was failing as a business, and moved the restoration shop to Whidbey, where I built a new boat shop and continued restoring boats for customers.
Where were you on Whidbey Island?
It was a Langley address, but we were at the end of Coles Road in the woods, basically, not in any town.
That was in 99, you say you moved there?
Yeah, 1999, and finished building the shop in early 2000, and enjoyed living on South Whidbey until my wife and I looked at each other one day and realized that we really wanted to live on the other side of the Sound and have Port Townsend be our town, rather than Langley or some of the settlements on Whidbey. So we spent weekends driving around the entire Puget Sound area in this new search for a place to build and live and retire eventually. And when we drove on to Marrowstone Island, which is just across Port Townsend Bay from Port Townsend, we really felt we were at home, and so we've ended up settling in Nordland, which is not a town at all. It's the Nordland General Store and Post Office on Mystery Bay. And so we love living here, and we built a boat shop alongside the log house that we live in, and life is great here. So we're very happy living out in the boonies and having a boat shop and having wonderful projects to work on and great customers to work with. It's not a bad way to go.
So for our listeners, tell them about Port Townsend and the history there with the maritime wood boat industry and all that.
Well, Port Townsend has been a real focus of the wooden boat revival since the mid-'70s, when the first Port Townsend Wooden Boat Festival took place. Not long after Wooden Boat Magazine was launched, I think maybe only 1 year after the Lake Union Wooden Boat Festival launched in Seattle. And Port Townsend has had a rich maritime history going back to the 1800s, with a lot of boats built here, a lot of boat repairs taking place here. And today the Port Townsend has a very rich and varied marine trades community, a great haul-out yard for boats, a couple marinas, and people who specialize in every imaginable marine trade. So it's sort of one-stop shopping for us when we need supplies for the work we do here. But
and then they just built a new building for the Northwest Maritime Center down there that's absolutely gorgeous.
The Northwest Maritime Center is such a great addition to the Northwest, not just to Port Townsend. And we love what they're doing there, and we have boat club meetings there in some of their rooms, and they have an active boat shop and rowing programs and library, and of course the wooden boat chandlery operation, which is very similar to the wooden boat shop that we operated in Seattle.
Yeah. So we're sitting in a little 20-foot sailboat that you told me a gentleman purchased the plans for it in 1940. So give us the short story version of this boat, Marty. It's pretty interesting.
This is a wonderful little raised deck cruising sailboat. It's a sloop, 20 feet overall. It was designed in 1937, by a naval architect in Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin, named Walter Hartel. And he designed it for a Milwaukee doctor and his wife, and then wrote an article in the December 1937 Rudder magazine about this design, and started getting some requests for plans. And a young man who lived in Los Angeles bought the plans probably in 1939 and started construction of this boat in 1940. And he framed it up, stem, keel, transom framing, and was just getting underway really when Pearl Harbor happened. And like a lot of young men, he immediately enlisted and went off to war and did not return until 1945. So in 1945, by then, he had decided he needed a bigger boat, and he ended up building a Herreshoff H-28 sloop. And this little project was put in dry storage. And it stayed in dry storage until 1960, when an engineer in the LA area named Gene Fish spotted the bare frame poking out of the open door of a warehouse, and made inquiries and was told that it was not for sale. And but his wife secretly persisted and bought it for him as a Christmas present in 1940, and they dragged the project home, and he finished building the boat over a 14-year period in their suburban garage. And
you know how much she paid for the boat?
I haven't asked that. Gene
Okay.
and his wife are alive and well at age 82, and they live now in Sequim, Washington. And we've visited with them, wonderful couple. And they sailed the boat from 1974, when he finished it, until 1997, when they sold the boat after retiring to Sequim. And they will be the first ones invited aboard for a sail when we finish the restoration in spring of 2012. So the boat was damaged in a storm last year in Brownsville Marina, and needs a fair amount of work and a total refinishing, but structurally it's very sound, and Gene Fish did a beautiful job of building the boat and finishing out the interior. So we were really excited when we had an opportunity to buy it a few weeks ago, and motor it home and haul it out.
Oh, you did motor at home?
Not with its original inboard. We just put a kicker motor on the transom.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah. So
are you going to put another inboard in this boat?
I don't know. That's something we have to study. I'm not eager to use the original 1940 engine. So we'll look around and study the situation, but I'm not opposed to living without an inboard engine in a 20-foot sailboat. I think it when we just used a 6-horse 4-stroke kicker to bring the boat up here from Brownsville, and we got hull speed at about 3/4 throttle with a little 6-horse. So I'm not opposed to just using an outboard and having keeping the interior of the boat clean and dry and free of oily bilge.
Right. Yeah. So Marty, you've worked on a lot of projects over the years, a lot of interesting stuff. Are there 2 or 3 that kind of stick out in your memory of boats you've worked on or projects you've done?
Well, some of the recent projects are as good as they get for us. We restored a 1938 24-foot sailboat, which we finished in the spring of this year for a couple. That was very similar to this raised deck design, and it was a boat that was designed by Charles Maurer, a naval architect. and built in '38, and needed everything. We love restoring old sailboats and old power boats. Another memorable recent project was a 1936 22-foot sort of cabin launch, designed and built on Lake Chelan in '36, and it's back on Lake Chelan now, in the hands of an owner who was a little kid living next door to the original owner builder, and had his first boat rides in this very boat on Lake Chelan when he was a little kid, and now he's retired and owns that same boat that he went for his first boat.
How many years later would that be, Marty?
Well, I think
50, 60 years maybe?
Yeah, he's retired now, and he was something like 8 years old when his family had a cabin next door to Lyle Moracek, who built the boat in 1936. So probably in the early 40s or thereabouts, Don MacArthur, the current owner, was a little kid living next door who enjoyed his first boat rides on the lake with the boat he now owns that we restored for him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The boat had been in the same boathouse on the lake for over 50 years, and the original owner-builder had died, and his adult kids owned the property, but they didn't really care about the old boat in the boathouse, and it was allowed to sink one winter inside the boathouse and was bashing around on the bottom of the lake, sort of destroying itself, bashing against boathouse pilings. And so it was quite a mess when we started work, but we did a total restoration and put it back on the lake last year.
Cool. So I'm just curious, from your perspective, you've been doing this for a long time. Do you feel like the wooden boat revival started in the 70s? Do you feel like that's continuing or holding its own or declining, or what's the state of that whole thing? I'm just kind of curious.
Well, it's not easy to assess. I know that the modern wooden boat revival absolutely started in the 70s with the founding of Wooden Boat Magazine, the first wooden boat festivals in different places around the country. I was in Seattle and was one of the founding members of the Center for Wooden Boats back in the 70s, and so a lot of us were there through that whole exciting period of the so-called wooden boat revival. And I think throughout the 70s and 80s there seemed to be more people who had time to build boats or restore boats as a hobby. And my impression today is that our culture is operating at a different kind of warp speed, and the economy is such that a lot of people are working multiple jobs and have families and are just trying to survive and have less time for hobbies of any sort, whether it's boat building or tennis. And I don't see as many individuals building or restoring boats as we saw back in the 70s and 80s. Mm-hmm. The fever over classic boat building or restoration seems to have waned, and there are still a lot of us doing it, but I think that things have leveled out a lot since those early days.
Right.
And a lot of the people who were building boats in the 70s and 80s are maybe building fine furniture or other home-related projects today. Not having lost all interest in boats, but I think the small craft fever has leveled out for sure.
Right. But there's still a fair amount of interest there, and festivals go on every year. And I was at the Wooden Boat School this morning, and they've got 44 students over there. They're going to go through the program, so that's pretty cool.
We're very lucky to have the Center for Wooden Boats and the Wooden Boat Foundation and the Northwest Maritime Center and the Working Waterfront Museum in Tacoma and other things in the Northwest along those lines, and to have classes being offered. The School of Wooden Boat Building near here in Port Hadlock has been a phenomenal resource for us. Everyone we've hired here at Island Boatshop to work on any of these boats, every one of them have been graduates of the Northwest School of Wooden Boat Building.
Wow, cool.
And
very cool.
We've just had terrific experience with graduates from that school. And so we're very lucky to be in the neighborhood of that school and have access to not just some of the graduates, but some of the current students who are looking for part-time work.
Very cool, very cool. So Marty, we're going to wrap it up here. Could you give us your contact information again, your email, phone number, and website for our listeners?
It's Island Boatshop. The physical address, the mailing address, is Box 216, Nordland, Washington 98358. Phone number is 360-301-6737. Email is marty@islandboatshop.com. And the website, which is I hope people will look at because it really tells all, is www.islandboatshop.com.
Cool, very cool. Any parting comments for our listeners, Marty?
I just really encourage people to visit some of the maritime museums like the Center for Wooden Boats and the Northwest Maritime Center. Get involved in some of the sailing and rowing and boat building programs, and give us a call if they have a rotten old boat that they want to get rid of.
There you go. Very cool. All right. Well, thanks for joining us today, Marty. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed that interview with Marty Loken of the Island Boatshop. And I am going to leave some link information on my website. As he mentioned, his website is islandboatshop.com. And I'm also going to put a phone number and an email in the show notes for the website. And in case you didn't know, if you do go to my website and you look up Podcast 11, what I do is I just give a real brief synopsis of what the podcast is about, and I show some pictures about the episode, and then I will include links on there that I mentioned during my audio presentation. So it's a good place to follow up with if you're just listening to the podcast and you want that additional information, or you want to see some pictures. Please call my listener hotline, 424-261-2360. That's 424-261-2360 with any questions or comments that you do have. Or you can email me at dan@hookedonwoodenboats.com. Leave a comment on the website, connect with me on Facebook or Twitter. And please leave feedback on iTunes. That would be awesome if you did that. Thanks for listening today. I really appreciate your support and feedback. And until next week, keep the bright side up and the barnacled side down. Wooden Boat Dan, over and out.